around all over the place in time, like we are in a Doctor Who episode, or perhaps Quantum Leap, if that is more your time travel TV speed. Now, I am going to get us back to the St. Regis and Genie Gang towards the end of the tour, but for now, I'm going to throw us back all the way to 10,000 years ago, to the very beginning, to tell you about some of the natural architecture of the Chicagoland area, the lake and the river itself. That would be at the end of the last ice age. Now, as the massive ice sheets that covered most of North America at the time melted and retreated, they gouged out giant depressions in the Earth's surface and then filled them up, creating the Great Lakes as we know them today. The modern-day Great Lakes, including Lake Michigan behind us right now, contain 1/5 of the entire world's fresh water supply. Ever since the end of that last ice age, folks have lived in this area. This is the closest meeting place between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River, which is down the south branch of the Chicago River. So this isn't just a metropolis today, this has been a very important trading route. For centuries, all sorts of different people have moved through and lived in this place. People like the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi, from whose language we get the modern-day name of the city of Chicago. The Potawatomi call this place Chicagawa, which I am pretty sure I mispronounced, but which roughly translates to stinky onions because of the water garlic that used to grow along the shores of Lake Michigan. And that got mispronounced in French by the first Western settlers out here as Chicagua. And that is where we get the modern-day name of the city, Chicago. But I have been reliably told that because indigenous languages do not map perfectly onto English, a more accurate, literal translation of the name Chicagawa would be, man, that place really stinks. The exclamation, man, is an important part of that place name, and you can almost smell it if you put a little stank on it when you say,
like, where's it?
Ew! Chicagawa! Luckily, I think it smells much better out along the Chicago River this fine afternoon. Now, the river itself has also been here since the end of the last ice age. And for most of its 10,000-year existence, it flowed east out into Lake Michigan. That is the natural direction of the Chicago River. But that became a problem for the city of Chicago as it grew, because we were dumping all of our sewage and garbage and byproducts from the old Chicago meat packing industry into the river, which was also flowing east out into the lake. And that is where the city gets all of its drinking water from. It started to make a lot of people very sick. So in the year 1889, we called in the Army Corps of Engineers. They dug a whole bunch of canals down the south branch of the Chicago River, connecting it to the Des Plaines River, which sits at a lower elevation. In doing so, we gave the water a different direction to flow downhill. So using just the force of gravity, we reversed the flow of the Chicago River. It now flows away from the lake west, down the south branch of the river, into the Des Plaines River, and finally out into the Mississippi, sending all of our water and garbage down towards the city of St. Louis.
It's the Sweet Melissa boat.
The city of St. Louis was not happy about this. We did not ask them first.
That'd be
They did not want our garbage. They sued the city of Chicago. Chicago ended up winning that lawsuit in part because it was determined to be a matter of life and death for us. By the time that water got to St. Louis, people thought it was diluted enough that it wasn't as much of a problem. Nowadays, the river is much cleaner, so it's not really a problem for anyone anymore. But it does mean that theoretically we could take this boat all the way down the Mississippi towards the city of New Orleans.
Some areas ain't too bad. It's pretty.
Around the coast of Florida.
Depends on what areas you go to. They do have its bad spots, but there is a lot of nice places here in down Chicago.
That would take slightly longer than the 75 minutes you have allotted for your boat tour today.
So Odyssey, I think that's a dinner cruise where you can actually eat while you're out, enjoying the views downtown.
Talking about some of the human-made architecture here along the Chicago River. Our first stop is going to be the year 1924 with this white building off the right-hand side of the boat that's got a clock tower up on top of it. That is the Wrigley Building. And if you are looking up at the Wrigley Building and thinking, wow, that looks kind of fancy for 1924, that's only 100 years ago, and this kind of looks older than that. Looks a bit like an old church. Well, that is on purpose. This is a style called Spanish Revivalism. It was a popular architectural style in the United States in the 1920s. As American architects, we're still finding our own in-house styles. We would often harken back to older, more Eurocentric forms from centuries past. The clock tower up on top of the Wrigley Building is based off of La Giralda Clock Tower at the Cathedral of Seville, Spain. That bright white terracotta tiling around the outside of the building gets brighter as it ascends the clock tower, serving to draw the eye upward towards the clock face. And that terracotta tiling is also so fragile that to this day, it has to be washed by hand using only soap and water. The Wrigley Building bears the name of the Wrigley Chewing Gum Company. That is a big Chicago name. It's also the name on Wrigley Field.
It's a Trump 2024, baby.
Speaking of big names, I bet you'll never guess the name of the building coming up directly behind me. It was built in the year 2009 by a Chicago architect named Adrian Smith. It is, of course, Trump International Hotel and Tower, which is a great example of a more recent architectural style called contextualism. If you look up the side of the building, you will see 3 flat patios ascending the tower. Those are called setbacks, and each one of these setbacks corresponds with the height of one of the other buildings around Trump Tower. The first setback is the same height as the roof of the Wrigley Building underneath its clock tower, which I just mentioned. The second setback corresponds with the height of this skinny rocket ship-looking building off the left-hand side of the boat. That's Mather Tower. And the third setback is the same height as AMA Plaza, a black boxy building, which will start peeking out from behind Trump Tower in just a moment here. Now, if you look directly off the right-hand side of the boat, you'll see a wavy pattern in the first few floors of Trump Tower. That is another contextualist feature that mimics the waves of the Chicago River. So the building is built in context, both with the natural elements around it and with the other buildings that came here before it. Next up, off the right-hand side of the boat, peeking out from behind AMA Plaza, you'll see 2 of the more iconic buildings on this architecture tour. I like to call these towers the Corn Cobs. Now, their actual name is Marina City, but they kind of